All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to New Hampshire Peace Action's Peace and Justice Conversation Series. My name is Will Hopkins. I'm the Executive Director of New Hampshire Peace Action. If you're new to us, we educate, mobilize, and organize to build a more peaceful and just future for all. We envisage a future where international relations are based on cooperation instead of competition and conflict, and where mutual benefit and shared security lead to a more peaceful and just global community. The corona pandemic spurred us to start this bi-weekly conversation series as a way to continue our public education work. And we found it so effective that we've decided to continue on indefinitely, although it also looks like corona may continue on indefinitely. This bi-weekly online conversation series is intended for us to help engage and sort out how to make the changes we've all been yearning for. In the spirit of understanding and respect, we'd like to acknowledge that we're doing our work here in New Hampshire on the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples past and present. We honor with gratitude the land and waterways that they've been stewarding throughout the generations that have been stolen. So tonight we are bringing Ellen Groh to speak. Over the last couple of weeks, all four of New Hampshire's congressional representatives, both senators and both Congress people, voted in favor of a $768 billion Pentagon budget. It's more than any wartime budget in history, and it's larger than any military budget in history, period. It's an amount of money that could end homelessness several times over in this country. And it's really hard we're an organization that does mostly peace work, but all of these allies everywhere are looking for money for things. I mean, for instance, ending homelessness. We know, everybody on this call probably knows that ending homelessness in the long term saves money, right? Like we spend less if we have early intervention and make sure everybody is housed, then we don't have the fallout that homelessness creates. Yet our government continues to prioritize making bombs and guns. And this is one of the best examples of places where that money should be spent. We're really excited to have Ellen. She's going to give us a brief overview of homelessness and discuss solutions that are working. And she's also going to talk to us about the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness and what their approach is. Ellen's been the executive director of the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness since 2014. Even before that, she has a long history working on issues of poverty. She's worked as a legal services attorney in North Carolina. She's worked in affordable housing in North Carolina. And she's also worked with private developers in affordable housing. She's got a doctorate from the University of North Carolina School of Law and a master's in public health from Harvard School of from the Harvard School of Public Health. Ellen, thank you so much for being with us tonight. As we're hitting the longest night of the year, it's a time that I know I always appreciate thinking of those, as we think about the people who don't have homes on this longest night and what that means for them. So thanks for being here, and take it away.
All right, thank you for having me, and thank you everybody. Can you all hear me okay? There's some nods out there, great. Sometimes my speaker gets wonky. Thank you for taking a night out during this busy time to hear about this topic. I really, really appreciate that, and appreciate the chance to pass on whatever I can to help with the conversation. So I've been the director at Concord Coalition to End Homelessness for about 8 years now. And like everyone else, COVID-19 has had an enormous impact on our work. So I'll talk about that a little bit as we go on. Our organization is strictly focused on the greater Concord area. So that's what I know the most about, and I will highlight that. But I'll also try to talk a little bit about the statewide perspective and even national perspective on some of these issues. So I am going to try to share my screen here. We practiced this before. Here we go. Da-da-da. Okay, you can all see my screen, right? I'm in the wrong spot. Okay, I'm just going to get this. Okay, guys, can all see that? Oh, great. All right, so I will start a little bit about Concord Coalition to End Homelessness and our guiding principles. So our core belief is two of them. One of them is that every person has value, no matter what they've done, no matter what their situation is. And I'm sure that this lines up quite a bit with New Hampshire peace action beliefs. And the other core belief we have is that ending homelessness is absolutely possible. And I want to tell you a little bit more about what we mean by ending homelessness. So the agreed upon goal that many of us are striving for is that ending homelessness means that all chronically homeless people have the permanent housing, not a shelter, but permanent housing and the support services that they need to stay stably housed, and that there's a system in place and the resources that will ensure that ensures homelessness is prevented whenever possible, or if it can't be prevented, it is a rare, brief, and one-time experience. So as long as we have the economic system that we have in this country, it's unrealistic to think that people will never fall into homelessness. So the goal is that if somebody becomes homeless, they are very, very rapidly rehoused, like within a month, and that they have supports they need during that time period. And if we can reach that point, we will consider homelessness to have been ended, as we're defining it, as long as that's the case. And for somebody, let's see. So for the majority of people who ever experience homelessness, it is a one-time event in their life. They're living on the edge precariously, financially, and they have a crisis of some kind, a car breakdown, the loss of a job, a medical issue comes up, and they become homeless. But with some financial assistance, they can usually get back on their feet within a fairly short period of time. So for the majority of people who are ever homeless, that's the situation that they're in. For a smaller percentage of people, about 20% of all people who are ever homeless, it does become a chronic condition, becomes a way of life. For months, for years, we have people that we work with who have been homeless for 20 years. Usually, if somebody is in this situation of chronic homelessness, they have some other underlying issue going on, whether that's a physical or mental health issue or substance use disorder or some combination of all of those things. So when someone has a disabling condition and they've been homeless for more than a year, that's when we consider them to be chronically homeless. And even though this is a very small percentage of all people who are ever homeless, they do use the lion's share of resources, whether that's homeless shelters or case managers' time trying to help them connect with services, as well as other public services like the police, jails, hospital emergency rooms, ambulances, all kinds of other public services are disproportionately used up with people who are chronically homeless because they have a lot of issues that come to the surface in their homelessness. So the idea is that if you can get this group of people, this small percentage of people permanently housed and stable in their own home, all of those other costs will drop dramatically. And I think as Will was saying before, it actually saves money if you can get people who are chronically homeless housed, and if you can prevent homelessness altogether for that other population that's just living on the edge financially. If you can help them out to prevent homelessness in the first place, you will save tons of money overall. So we know that this ending homelessness and ending chronic homelessness is absolutely possible because it has been done. So there are 5 communities across the United States that have ended chronic homelessness. So this is a wonderful outcome, and this is absolutely what Concord Coalition to End Homelessness is striving to do, is to add Concord to that list. And of course, the whole state of New Hampshire would be awesome as well. But as I said, our focus is on Concord. And we do have many, many partners. We do not expect in any case that we could do this by ourselves. It's all of these different agencies and other groups working together that will get this done. So I am going to just tell you a little bit about our organization and the things we actually do. We have a daytime resource center where people can come and meet their basic needs. So this is a year-round daytime facility where people can take a shower, do their laundry, use the phone, use the internet, receive their mail. That's a big thing for people who are homeless, is where do you get your mail? And also receive case manager support to try to help hook into whatever resources are available. There we had a group of the barbers would come once a month and cut people's hair. So other agencies come and reach out to clients through our facilities. We serve about 40 people a day, and we see approximately 600 unique individuals every year. The other thing we operate is an emergency winter shelter. So that's open December through March. It's nighttime only. People can then go to the resource center in the day. It is low barrier, the same as our resource center, meaning that you can arrive under the influence of any kind of substance, and we're not going to turn you away for that, so long as your behavior is not disruptive or violent. We don't allow any drug use or alcohol use on our premises, but you can arrive in whatever condition you are, and we will meet you where you're at. And this is a picture of our shelter pre-COVID, where you can see the beds are just crammed into this room side by side. And we could serve up to 40 people a night. So I'll tell you a little bit about the changes after COVID in a couple of minutes, but those were our facilities. And the third program, this is the one that I'm most excited about, because this is where you actually end homelessness, is our permanent supportive housing programs. So the Resource Center and the Winter Shelter are absolutely critical. They provide a crisis response for people, but this is how you end homelessness. So permanent supportive housing combines ongoing rental assistance. So that actually helps somebody pay the rent. If they only have a disability income of about $800 a month, they are never going to afford an apartment anywhere. So rental assistance will actually pay the difference between what they can afford, which we say is 30% of your income, whatever that is. No more than that should go towards your housing. So the rental assistance will make up the difference, and the landlord can still receive the amount they need to keep the apartments running, but the person is paying a rent that's affordable to them. And permanent supportive housing also means that you have ongoing case manager support. So for people, like I said, who've been chronically homeless, they usually have a lot of other underlying issues going on. And the idea is that as they are ready, as they choose to, they can address those issues, and the case manager can help them hook up with whether that's mental health services or addiction services or reconnecting with their family or whatever it is that is on what they want to pursue from the stability of their own home. And this has been proven nationwide to be 80 to 90% successful. The person is able to remain successfully housed as long as they have this ongoing supportive services to help them. And honestly, some people who've been homeless for many, many years, part of it is just learning how to live in an apartment again and be a good neighbor and not bother your neighbors and take your trash out on the right day, those things that you might take for granted having lived in a home for a long time. All right, so hang on one sec, I'm gonna shift my notes. So those are the programs and a little that we run, and a little bit of the big picture of what we do. I don't even know how to back up slides. I will say in our permanent supportive housing, we can now serve 22 different people. Some of them are living in apartments around Concord with a private landlord, and we supply the rental assistance and the case manager support. And then we own 2 different buildings ourselves where the people can get case manager support and rental assistance there. We are estimating that there are about 100 to 150 chronically homeless people living in Concord right now in their cars, down by the river, staying in the shelter during the winter. But that's the group that we're really focused on, finding ways to have permanent supportive housing available to all of those people. The other piece that we're working on is really pinning that number down, really knowing by name who are the people who are chronically homeless in Concord at any given moment. And we've gotten actually a special donation from one of our donors to hire a person who's really focused on just pinning that number down, because and who are those people and what are their specific needs? Because in all of those 5 communities that I showed you that have ended chronic homelessness, that's where they started. They started with a comprehensive list that was updated in real time, that they knew exactly who was homeless, and they worked their way down the list. So that's what we aim to do. So switching to the statewide perspective, as I said before, COVID has had a huge impact on the field of homelessness. A lot of it negative, but there has been some positive results of COVID as well. So in New Hampshire, back in, I guess it was September, October, Governor Sununu dismantled the former Interagency Council on Homelessness, which I think had been fairly inactive in the last few years, and he created a new Council on Housing Stability. He gave him a very big task, which was to come up with a strategic plan for 2021, 2024 in just a few months' time. This Council on Housing Stability has it's a very diverse set of people who were appointed to be on it. Several mayors, business people, people with lived experience of homelessness, faith community, representatives of different shelters and other service organizations. It was a very diverse group, and they really, really worked hard over a short period of time to come up with that strategic plan. And it is 40 pages long. It's not the easiest reading in the world, but if you are interested in this topic, I would absolutely go look at that strategic plan. There are a lot of charts and graphs that you can skip through if you want, but that's the heart of where we as a state are trying to get on ending homelessness and housing stability in general, not just homelessness. In that document, it points out that homelessness has been increasing over the last couple of years, both from the point and count numbers, which is a one-time count every year. Everyone goes out on the same night and tries to count everyone who's homeless that night. So those numbers have increased, as well as just the number of people who actually access services over the course of the year, which last year was 4,400 people. So there's no question that the problem is growing at this time. I will say, actually pinning down the number of people who are homeless is more challenging than you might think. A lot of people come and go off the radar. There's a lot of different agencies interacting with people. As a state, we are trying to come up with a system that is more integrated and we can share our information with each other better, but it is a challenging task to really pin that number down. So the issues and the impact of COVID that we've felt. So when COVID first hit, there was a huge need to decompress shelters for social distancing. Most shelters maybe weren't as crowded as the one that I showed you. Our shelter is extremely crowded, but most of them were congregate. People were sharing the same space in close quarters. So there was a huge need to find ways to decompress the shelters. There was a lack of and there remains a lack of staffing and facilities to isolate people who test positive for COVID if they are in a shelter. Also brought on by COVID, lots of people lost their jobs. This is no secret to any of you. And they were already precariously housed. So here comes that crisis that pushes you over the edge. Rental costs have been absolutely skyrocketing, utterly skyrocketing. We're trying to gain more permanent housing in under our control, and outside investors are buying duplexes and triplexes sight unseen, just putting an offer the day that they come on the market for over the asking price, no contingencies, buying them up and immediately jacking up the rents $300-400. So the people there can't afford to stay. New Hampshire right now has a 0.4% vacancy rate, where 5% is considered healthy. So it's a vicious market out there for somebody who has a stable job and a good rental history. Somebody who has prior evictions, maybe no rental history, maybe a criminal history. Their application is on the bottom of the pile of any landlord, and so it's extremely hard to get somebody permanently housed, even if they have a rental assistance voucher in their hand. It's very hard to find an apartment. So those are the issues that were exacerbated by COVID. There were some positives, though. We had the eviction moratorium that was in effect for I guess it was a year and a half, which really saved a lot of people, kept people in their homes. I know it was an issue for some landlords, so it was not a perfect solution by any means, but it did prevent homelessness for a huge group of people. I believe that overall there is way higher awareness of the national affordable housing crisis than there was 3 years ago. It is on it's in the newspaper every day, which that wasn't the case pre-COVID. So that's a plus in my mind. And there is more money funding flowing to address homelessness than there has been in a generation. This is a moment in time where there is so much opportunity because of these funds that are flowing. So there was the CARES Act, the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan. There was short-term, and still is short-term, emergency rental assistance for people that can last for up to a year and a half to help them pay for just rent if their job has been affected by COVID. There was 280 new housing choice vouchers. These are permanent rental assistance, like I was talking about, that people who are chronically homeless really are not going to be able to afford an apartment without these housing choice vouchers. Before COVID, there was an 8-year waiting list to get one of those vouchers. None of the people we dealt with had a housing choice voucher in their hand. When this new wave came through, we had 10 or 12 people get housing choice vouchers in a matter of months. It was unprecedented. I will say there's still 5 or 6 of those people trying to find a place to use it because they can't find an open apartment where the rent meets the cap that they can go up to and where the landlord is willing to rent to them. They're still walking around looking for a place to use that voucher. But still, this was a huge wave of opportunity that did not exist before COVID. We also, our agency and many other shelters were able to receive through the CARES Act shelter modification funds. Again, large amounts of money that went out very rapidly on a much more rapid time frame than normal. We were able to use those funds to purchase a church a block away from us for $800,000. That was like an $800,000 grant that, just a gift from God. And we were able to use that church to move our shelter and our resource center over to that building, which was much larger, and spread people out to prevent the spread of COVID. And our hope is that when this pandemic ever ends, we will turn that church into affordable housing and come back to our old facility. So that we're still figuring out how that will all work. But that was a huge windfall to us, a great moving us forward in a great way. and New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, which is the main organization that holds various grant funds for building affordable housing and permanent supportive housing. They got waves of new money, and I was going to write down all the amounts, but I didn't have time to look them up, and I didn't want to misspeak, but I will just say this is, again, more money than this field has seen in a generation. So there's huge opportunities here that didn't exist before COVID. And Build Back Better, I know we got bad news on that over the weekend, but if it comes back to life, it also has tremendous amounts of resources for affordable housing development and those housing choice vouchers. Those housing choice vouchers are, they are gold for ending homelessness, because the people we are trying to serve just are not going to be able to afford rents without them. So let me see. So that was most of what I had to say. I put this slide up just because we do function with the support of so many individuals and so many organizations. And these are the main institutions that really keep our doors open. So I always try to make sure people know about them, and that we're really grateful to them. And we have hundreds of individual donors who help us out as well. So that was all that ended my part of the presentation, but I am happy to try to answer any questions that people have. I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see people.
Yeah. As we move into this section, folks, you can feel free to raising your hand on the screen. I probably won't see because there are too many of us, but if you can use the virtual hand raise feature, I should be able to see that. Another way, if you want to ask your own question, would be to put an asterisk in the chat and I'll know to recognize you. If you prefer not to speak, which most of the time people are just as happy to have me read their questions, you can feel free to put your questions in the chat. Ellen, before questions start pouring in, I had a couple questions. First, could you say the number again of people in the Concord area who are chronically homeless?
We are estimating 100 to 150, and I know that's a pretty wide range there, but again, it's hard to pin down, but that's our estimate.
And then I had another, I'll make some space. I'll come back to my other question so we've got questions from Marianne. Marianne, would you like to ask them yourself, or do you want to type them in? I think she's typing.
Actually, I pushed the wrong button, but that's okay. I had a couple of questions. One, what is the interaction between Family Promise and this organization?
I would consider them one of our partners. They focus on families, obviously, and we focus on individuals. Our real niche is chronically homeless people, which tends to be individuals, because if you've been homeless that long, you do not tend to still have your children living with you. So we have a whole network, and I didn't really go into that, but there's a whole network of providers who are all in contact with each other and collaborate, and Family Promise is one of them. As well as the Friends program in Concord also deals with family homelessness, and the McKenna House, the Salvation Army McKenna House shelter, is also a shelter for adults, and they are a year-round shelter. Our shelter is just winter, really meant to be overflow.
Yeah. My second question is, how do you verify a person's, well, what do I want to say, residence? I mean, in other words, are there people that move from state to state in these kind of situations, and how do you deal with that kind of issue?
There are definitely people who move from state to state, and again, it's each person's story is their own. But so in our shelter, we'll ask people their zip code of last permanent address, and I would say 2/3 of them are listing Concord as their last permanent address. But even those that are listing some, wherever, Florida or Nashua or something, you really don't know how long it was that they lived, how long ago was it that they had a permanent address in that place? They might have lived in Florida, but they've been up here in Concord for 2 years now. You know, it's very hard to track that information in any kind of easily reportable fashion.
Right.
And I will say, we have a lot of folks that we might offer. There might be a housing opportunity that comes up in Claremont or, you know, some other Nashua, and our person is next on the list, and they say, no, I don't want to go. Concord is my home, even though they're homeless. They feel Concord is their community. They may have, you know, providers here, medical providers or mental health providers here that they don't want to shift, or it's just they feel this is their home and they don't want to go move around.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne. Sarah Ellis would love it if you could repeat the 5 communities that have ended homelessness. I know one was Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Gosh, am I going to be able to say it off? I might have to go back to my screen just because Lancaster was one. Hang
Rockford,
on.
Illinois.
Thank you, Rockford, Illinois. Let's see, now I don't know how to. Oh, brother. Let me write them down and I'll remember. Abilene, Texas, I think was one. Rockford, Illinois. Is this being recorded? Will we be able to?
It is, yeah. So folks can go back to look at that slide. No, it was an entire county in
Bakersfield.
New Jersey and California.
Bergen County, New Jersey, and Bakersfield, California. Did we get
Perfect.
it
Thank
all?
you.
Okay, sorry. I should know them by now, but
No, I was impressed that you managed to remember them all. So Joan B asks, any possibility that some of the vast empty space in the mall could be turned into affordable housing?
well,
that
we
at
have
all?
talked about that. We've explored that. That particular mall, I don't want to, let's see, I want to be politically correct here. That owner does not live in this state, and they have resisted any attempts by lots of different developers have approached them apparently about doing something there, and they are just not interested. I know when we spoke with the city about it, they said, we would love to see something happen in that mall. Like that could be a cornerstone of a lot of things for the community, but the owners are not interested in changing what's happening there. So we did look into it. It would be a big undertaking, but it was an exciting idea. But there was just no nothing coming from the owner wanting to deal with anyone on it.
So Melissa Bernardin is our next questionnaire. With current once-in-a-generation resources that are coming in, as Ellen mentioned, ARP funds, and if Build Back Better passes, what percentage of current unhoused people in Greater Concord would receive some form of help obtaining housing? Just trying to get a sense of the scale of the problem and recesses required to address it.
Right. Well, that's hard to say because even the ARP money, it's only now being decided how that money is going to flow, what form it's going to take, how it can be used, what the application process would be. One thing I didn't go into is that our agency has developed what we call our paths towards housing solutions. So we have one staff member who's really just working on running down any leads of what we can do to create more permanent supportive housing, whether that's buying up triplexes and duplexes, whether that's taking, like right now, we're looking at building a big house that it's a 4-bedroom house with a little attached apartment. And can we buy that and turn it into 4 1-bedroom apartments instead and get that rental assistance that I was talking about for the people that we serve. So that would be that type of money could go towards those kinds of things. We also work with developers of large apartment complexes, 20 or 40 or 100 unit complexes, and say, can you set aside 5% of the units for people coming from homelessness? And we've had success with that. One of the new developments in Concord will be doing that with us. So there's a lot of different, there's not one solution. There's a bunch of different solutions. So I don't know how I would answer that question. I just think that it's going to take a lot of different agencies doing a lot of different solutions that will piecemeal together enough housing for all the people who need it.
Cool. Tracy Tinker asks, with the use of housing vouchers, how much case management is provided after someone is housed?
So from our agency, for the 4 units that we own and the 16 people who are in scattered site, we provide pretty intensive case management. The 16 people who are living out in the community just under a private landlord, we have 1 case manager who works with those 16 people. So, and that's about the ratio that feels right for when people are coming from chronic homelessness. That's all she does is work with those folks. So if that makes enough sense. And again, she's hooking them up with other providers. She is not a mental health counselor. She is not a lot of things. She hooks them up with the specific other resources that they might ask for.
I'm going to call out Will Thomas, who wants to read a quote and ask a question. Will, are you there?
I have to unmute myself. Am I vocal? Okay,
Yes.
Good. Well, first of all, thanks, Ellen, for all this valuable information for this. Really, tomorrow, I plan on being in Manchester at the vigil there. I think Concord is having one as well, right?
We are.
Yeah, so, but the thing that got me when Will was speaking about the National Defense Authorization Act and the $778 billion, I thought of the quote by Martin Luther King, if I may, very brief. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense, I would call it offense, but than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. And I'm not sure we're quite there, but we're near it. But the thing is, when you talked about this extensively, if people talk about raising the minimum wage, how about having a living wage? Would that help reduce homelessness?
Wow, that's such a big question. I think that it would. I think that it would certainly help with that short-term homelessness, that tipping of what I think of as tipping over the edge from somebody who's barely making all of their bills each month. And then they aren't making their bills each month, and they don't have a good safety net. They don't have someone to help them out for that interim period. So I think it would help that tremendously. Again, for the folks that are just through, I don't know, happenstance or just from sort of feeling our way through what was needed in our community, our agency has zeroed in on chronically homeless people as our niche, and a living wage isn't necessarily going to help those folks at this moment.
Right. About universal health care,
that would be huge. That would be huge.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, when you're talking about the vouchers, is that Section 8 referred to?
Section 8 is the most commonly known one, but there's others as well from different HUD programs. But yes, they all work essentially the same way.
But I agree with you that homelessness can be solved, but we're not willing to do it. Now, I'm not going to say it's capitalism, but I guess maybe I am going to say it's capitalism. All right, that's it, Will. Thank you.
Thanks for the laugh, Will. That gave me a chuckle. So the next question, I'm not sure you can answer, both because it might be a privacy issue and you may not know, but it's from Rebecca Massini. Is the building that looks like it has 4 units on Green and Baker at the light near Pleasant Street and South Street part of the coalition? Is it fully occupied, and is that permanent supportive housing?
Yes, and yes. And since it was in the newspaper quite a bit, I don't mind saying it. But yeah, that's a house that it was an office building, and we converted it into 4 one-bedroom apartments, and all of those apartments get project-based rental assistance. So it comes with the building, and that was all funded through New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. And if we hadn't gotten that rental assistance, it wouldn't have done us much good. We could have turned it into 4 one-bedroom apartments, but the people we're trying to serve would not have been able to afford to live there, because it still costs money, to run an apartment. You still have to pay the property manager, you have to pay the taxes, you have to pay the heat, plowing, all that stuff. So you still have to charge a rent that somebody who's only making disability income cannot afford.
So I have a question that may not be relevant to a lot of other folks, but since I've been through the questions in the chat, I wanna ask it, and that is, so a lot of, and it may not be relevant to most folks, but a lot of nonprofit leaders doing this work through COVID have talked about an endemic sense of burnout, that they're just exhausted and hopelessness, sometimes cynicism that creeps in. It sounds like your work has been as important, as critical, as urgent as it's ever been, and it also sounds like you've been able to do more about it than maybe you could before. How has that been for you in terms of your ability to keep pushing when the work can be so sad sometimes and so hard?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. I mean, our potential projects that we're working on for permanent housing do keep me going. I mean, that feels like we're getting somewhere. I am utterly frustrated right now that we are not in a state of emergency. I feel like things are 100 times worse than they were a year ago. And some of the benefits that were available then because of the state of emergency are no longer available. Simple things like going to a public meeting, now we all have to show up in person. We can't go in Zoom. And so now I have to risk being infected. Last year, the state operated an isolation center for people who tested positive. And it was also able to accept people from the hospital, for instance, who were ready for discharge and couldn't go back to the place they were staying. Maybe they were couch surfing. They didn't have their own home. They weren't homeless. They had a place, but now that they're testing positive for COVID, they're being told, no, you cannot come back here. Well, there was a state operated place where they could go. That doesn't exist right now because there's no state of emergency right now. So all of the shelters are supposed to come up with their own regional solution, which maybe we can manage, but here we're talking about a whole other set of people who we normally wouldn't have needed to help. We just don't have that capacity for that kind of overflow. And heaven forbid we get a wave through our own shelter of 10 or 12 people with COVID. What the heck are we supposed to do? It's scary what we're heading into right now. And I do feel like we should be in a state of emergency. We still are in a state of emergency, and as a state, we ought to recognize that.
All right, so Reverend Hogue, I'll come back to your question in a minute. This question's from Matt St. Onge. Matt asks, when fortunate folks want to hang out, they go to establishments like the Barley House and the Draft. Where can less fortunate folks hang out that's safer than down by the river?
Well, in the day, people can come to our resource center in Concord. That's part of the reason we're there. It's for all of those, shower and laundry, get your mail, but it's also just for a place to be where you won't be shooed along, where you'll be treated with respect and you can just be. So you can come there. That's, again, only Monday through Friday. And at this time, only 9 to 2, and that's a staffing issue. We have extended our hours in the past, and we may be able to do that again, but we're trying to not burn out the staff. We're trying to keep people through for the long haul. In Concord, also the Friendly Kitchen is another place. They are doing inside meals again, I believe. For a while, it was just takeout, which was challenging for the people they serve, but they wanted to let people back in, and they have, I believe. So those are two places. There aren't a lot of other places. Library, public library, people go sometimes, and the state library as well. And coffee shops back when, Dunkin' Donuts, back when you could go inside. I haven't kept up with which restaurants are and fast food places are letting people in and which are not. I think a lot are not because they don't have the staff.
So there's a question from Melissa, and there's also a question that may be a little bit. It's not rhetorical. It's looking for us to get into more action. I'm gonna come back to Melissa's because I'll ask this question. There may not be an easy answer because it is asking all of us to do more, I think. So can we declare a state of emergency? Get individuals and organizations to issue a declaration. And either Judy or Arnie, if you want to unmute and say a little more about that, and what you're thinking with that idea, feel free.
Well, just thinking that something that comes from the people. It is a state of emergency. I mean, Ellen is absolutely right. It's not certainly the people who are chronically homeless are feeling the worst of it, but our healthcare providers, our teachers, our students, I mean, across the board, it is an emergency right now. And our government, led by Mr. Sununu, is not recognizing it. So if that's the case, the people have to step forward and declare it ourselves. And now what exactly the consequences of that would be is another question, but it's worth at least considering. So that's what I was pondering.
Ellen, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that I think it would be great to make that sort of statement. I think that for the extra, I don't know what the right words are, for the benefits that you get that we got from a state of emergency in the past, that only happens when the governor declares it. But getting the governor to declare that, I think we need that. I do. I think we are in a state of emergency. I have been talking with the people at Concord Hospital quite a bit, and they are under such stress. There are people sitting in their emergency room hallways for days, waiting to be admitted, but there's no bed to admit them. And sometimes there's no bed because here's a person who needs to be discharged and there's no place to discharge them to because they have COVID and they have no place to go back to. So yeah, I think it's a very, very bad situation.
Thanks. Jumping back to Melissa's question, she'd like to know about any plans to build more senior housing so that older residents living alone in big houses have a place to go, and potentially free up new housing. And separately, what can we do to keep homes that come on the market from being scooped up by for-profit companies and people who are looking to turn a quick profit?
I don't know about either one of those questions, because my focus is definitely on just affordable housing for people coming from homelessness. That's where my focus is. I don't know senior housing. Often people who are doing affordable housing will do an age restriction. So that is something that happens. I don't know specifically how we go about encouraging that more, but there's a lot of seniors, I think, who want to downsize out of larger houses. And it's all part of that lack of housing in general that New Hampshire is experiencing. The second question was about, what was it? It was
so what can we do to keep homes that come on the market from being scooped up?
I do not know. That's a real issue. And our agency, we had to stick our necks out on this last purchase. We had to say, if we try to, with the Green Street project that we did, the county was selling the building. They waited an entire year for us to get our financing in place and jump through all the hoops we had to jump through. And they patiently waited an entire year while we did that. There is not a single seller in this world who's going to do that for us now. So we had to, stick our necks out and just put an offer in on a property and hope. And we're just hoping that it all works out. If it doesn't, we're hoping we can sell it again if it doesn't work out for our purposes. So I don't know how you stop that.
Another question from Will Thomas. What's the ratio of women to men relative to homelessness? And I would include other genders as well there. And do you have any idea how many veterans might be without homes in Concord?
In our winter shelter and our resource center, it is about 2/3 men and 1/3 women, give or take. It's the approximate. And as far as people who identify not as male or female, there's a small percentage of people. I could not tell you what it is, but there is some percentage that identify as something other than male or female. And the second part of that question, no retention here. You
Yeah,
can
it's
see.
okay. Do you have any idea about how many veterans are
Oh,
without homes in Concord?
in Concord, not many. I will tell you, veterans homelessness, the state of New Hampshire is close to being able to declare an end to veterans homelessness. And that is in part because a lot of resources were poured into that over the last 4 or 5 years. And unless, there's people who maybe have a dishonorable discharge or some other something on their record that is excluding them from certain programs. But even that, there's a lot of resources for veterans, and there's a system in place where we alert all those agencies that deal with veterans, and they kind of swoop in when someone is identified as a veteran.
Question from Chris Hansen about the Community Loan Fund.
Mhm.
Is it a source for buying and converting housing? Can it be? Do you work with the Community Loan Fund?
We do. We work with them a lot, and we've been in conversations with, we talk with them a lot. I wouldn't say we work with them a lot. And we had some good conversations with their new director, whose name I am blanking on, but I do know it. I'm just blanking. Somebody will probably write it in the chat. The Community Loan Fund, one of the great things they do is they will make loans to people who are higher risk. So home ownership loans to people who have a bad credit history or other sort of risk factors that a normal bank doesn't want to touch. The Community Loan Fund will help them out. But it's not at a low interest rate. They do have to charge a higher interest rate to cover that risk. The folks that we deal with are not ready for home ownership. So we've been in discussions with them about how we can partner together. We don't have a specific plan yet, but we were looking at they help with those resident-owned communities. Those are resident-owned mobile home manufactured home parks, and they're usually owned by the residents. When you live in one of those manufactured homes, you are the owner of that home. But we've been talking with a couple of them about could CCH own a unit in a resident-owned community and then sublet it to one of our clients. So we did have one community say, yes, I think we'd be open to that, but we're still figuring out the details of how we would get a unit into their park and all of that stuff. So we do work with them a little bit, but their emphasis is slightly different than ours.
Another question from Tracy. Do you work with homelessness outreach workers and CHWs? And I don't know what a CHW is. And if so, how? We
do. Very much so. So we are in constant contact with the CAP, the Community Action Program Homeless Outreach Team, and the Riverbends Homeless Outreach Team. And there are a couple of other groups that do some homelessness. The New Hampshire Harm Reduction does some outreach. And we just recently, I was talking about, we hired a person whose real focus is on making sure that we know everyone who is chronically homeless in Concord. And so she will be doing quite a bit of outreach in partnership with all of those other agencies that do it. Her focus is not so much on case management and finding a home for each of those people. It's on really figuring out who's out there and finding out everything we need to know about them so that we have a comprehensive view of what we're trying to solve.
And what's a CHW? What's that abbreviation?
I don't know what that is.
Tracy, do you want to?
Community health worker?
Oh, maybe community health worker?
Yes, sorry, community health worker.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, I'm not, well, if that counts as like Riverbend and their outreach, then yes, we're definitely working with them.
All right. Well, I want to give you a few moments to kind of close out and give closing thoughts. And we want to make sure we both get to Reverend Hoag's meeting that's coming up. And also I want to make sure that we invite people to the vigils tomorrow. So why don't you give closing thoughts, and I'll give some details for those. Actually, if you could give details for the Manchester one, if you want to give details for both of tomorrow's vigils, that'd be
I can give them for Concord, which is at the State House at 4:00 tomorrow night, and there'll be the reading of the names and all of that. So 4:00 at the State House tomorrow. And I guess my closing remarks is I'm just so glad that there is this community of people, all of you who care about these issues and take the time to learn about them. And I would, as much as you can, band together to make your voice really loud. That's helpful. Sometimes an organization in my shoes, we can't do a tremendous amount of that. I don't know. It's just a little harder. We're trying to work with different partners, both time-wise and also just politically. Sometimes it's easier to have another group speaking up really loudly, if that makes sense. So raising your voices would be wonderful, wonderfully appreciated.
Thanks, Ellen. Reverend Hogue, do you want to step in and talk about the meeting that's coming up on January 11th through Granite State Organizing Project? Go ahead.
A lot of information. Good evening. I would really appreciate everybody. It's called the Granite State Organizing Project for clergy to raise awareness and pressure on our leaders in the state for housing, affordable housing, and homelessness. So we're gathering to make a public media announcement. Please spread the word. And also in February, we're going to put more pressure one-on-one. Just a point of reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Hogue. And Will Thomas, can you tell us what time the vigil starts tomorrow in Manchester? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, off the top of my head, the latest word I had was at Veterans Park on Elm Street at 6 p.m.
All right.
I'll have to read.
All you night owls, Manchester's the place to be tomorrow. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you most of all to Ellen for your presentation. It was informative and a reminder of how our work links to the local. How the hope that we stop spending all of our federal dollars bombing people overseas and instead taking care of our own. That those numbers mean something and they matter and they affect real lives. So thank you so much for your presentation. This series is every other Monday, and you are encouraged to join us every other Monday. You can join us every Monday if you want, but the ones where we're not here might be a little less informative and exciting. And they're going to remain open and free to the public. To make a donation to support the work, you can check out nhpeaceaction.org/donate. You could also check out Ellen Groh's organization, the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness, and make a donation there to help that. And then you'll want to join us every other Monday. I'm going to give you our next few events. Let me just open up my spreadsheet. So on 2 weeks from today, on January 3rd, I will be our presenter, and I'm just going to talk about what our priorities are, although we may have more of a conversation with some folks from our board and events committee about what our priorities are going to be. And that's going to lead into our board retreat a few weeks later. So please come and tell us what matters to you so that we can shape our work for the next year. Marcy Winograd is going to be here on January 12th, which is not a Monday, but she's going to talk to us about the links between climate and militarism. On January 17th, we're going to have Brenda Lett. She's going to be presenting on Dr. King's legacy. And then we're going to circle back around, and Amy Antonucci, our events committee chair, is going to lead a conversation about how our first conversation led through the board retreat and into how we're going to do this work together in the year to come. 2 weeks after that will be February 14th, and that will be Dr. Joseph Gerson, who's going to talk to us about China and the new nuclear arms race. So please join us every other Monday, and we'll see you soon. Thanks. Good night.
Thank you all.